How do we build better workplaces in a post-COVID environment? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we feature difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen, and my guest today is Scott Behson. Scott is a professor of management and a Silberman Global Faculty Fellow at Fairleigh Dickinson University. He is a national expert in work and family issues, and he's also the author of The Whole Person Workplace. Today, we're going to be talking about ways that the workplace is transforming and why that is actually good for everyone. That's why that's good for the top line, the bottom line, and everything in between. And so I'm excited to talk about having this conversation today. Now, before we go any further, I do want to do a shout out to the team at Dallin Miller. And I always love acknowledging those that support this show, and Dallin Miller and many other podcast booking agents have sent me guests that Dallin recommended. Scott, that's why we're here. And so thank you to Dallin and the team. Also, I just want to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by my coaching and training company. And so if you are a leader who wants to be better, do better, and make a greater impact, you can book a free consult with me by going to leadersoftransformation.com/coaching. We can talk about your goals, your opportunities that you've got going on, maybe even the breakthrough that's necessary for you to become the leader of transformation that you are capable of being. So again, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com/coaching for details, and there is a scheduling link that is provided there. All right, let's bring Scott on. Scott, welcome to the Leaders of Transformation. We're glad you're here today.
Hi, thanks, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. And I really enjoyed your book. I have to say it's very thorough, and it's practical, and it's not just another theoretical book, but it is something that you can tell you've done a lot of research on. I know that you've interviewed a lot of leaders. There's a lot of examples through that book. So tell us a little bit about that story to write this book, because I know you mentioned to me that you actually had another book that you were planning, and then life happened, and here we are with a different topic, and probably a better topic.
Yeah, so I was a little bit into writing the book. I had it, everything that goes into writing a book, the book proposal and the outlining and all this stuff, for something that was going to be very specific on things like parental leave and, supporting working parents in the early childhood years. And then, like everything else in March, 2020, everything got turned upside down. I had already scheduled all these interviews for March, April, May. I still did them with all these chief human resources officers and CEOs and business leaders. But it was right at, oh my God, what is happening in the world? How do I, sustain my business? How do I take care of my people? So it turned out I spoke to, many of the people I spoke to for the book right at the time where they're really dealing with the heaviest issues, right? In terms of how do we support the whole people who work for us. And it expanded the view of the book greatly, because I asked them right off the bat, why is it important to support people? And they talked about things way beyond just working parents and supporting them. They talked really about, in that time, how do I make sure people are physically safe? How do I make sure that people are psychologically safe? How do I make sure people are well in terms of, just physical, but also mental well-being, and all the anxiety and, everything we had to live through and still are living through, unfortunately. You said post-COVID before. I hope that will be true soon. But it was at a time where these business leaders were grappling with such bigger issues. And they kept coming to this theme of that one of the things that was revealed to a lot of businesses was that, many organizations try to be like, work is work, and the rest of your life you just take care of, and that's separate. And was a false distinction. And that when people are either remote working, and you can see everybody's living rooms and cats and daughters and things like that coming through, and you can understand that, at that time there was no childcare, school was not in person, so all these people were juggling all these life and work all at the same time. It became more apparent to more employers that it's foolish to try to separate work and life. And in fact, the two can enhance each other, and the two can really detract from each other. So if people have a good experience at work, it helps them in their lives. But also, if employers take a little bit more value and care for their employees, it could really make the work so much better. So, like, for example, if you are stressed out about, taking care of your mother-in-law with Parkinson's, or trying to deal with that paperwork, you can't be present and fully engaged at work that day because you're worrying about all these other things. If you're not secure in your finances or your housing or whatever else, you can't really be fully there at work. And so it's not only the right thing to do to try to help the whole people who work for us with their other life responsibilities and challenges and priorities and passions that they might have outside of work. It's not only the right thing to do, it's also good business, because you're going to get a workforce that is more engaged and is there for you, right, and would be willing to reciprocate. And also, the employers who had some of these values, they were 10 steps ahead when the pandemic hit, because their employees already knew how to collaborate. They already knew how to trust each other. They already knew how to rely on each other. Managers and employees already had good relationships that they could bank on. So they were 10 steps ahead in terms of reacting to this crisis. And they're 10 steps ahead in the Great Resignation now, too, because they're not losing people because of poor working conditions or not being respected fully, or many of the other reasons that people are looking for new jobs today. So I'm sorry if I'm giving kind of a big
I love it. I think that's
all over the place answer, but so the way the book turned out, I think it led me in a direction that was kind of a more impactful direction, number one. Number two, I think it's rare that a book writer can kind of do something right in the middle of the biggest workplace transformation in 50 years, maybe more. So I'm so proud that I was able to kind of chronicle this time, and what kind of proactive employers were doing during this time to really not just financially succeed, but also really making sure we take care of and value our employees as whole people, not just as a piece of the machine, or even as an asset that or we take care of an asset because we want a return on investment, and that's good, but it's not as good as valuing an employee as a whole person, which means there's an extra level of care and responsibility that goes both ways in that relationship.
Yeah. So my cat is jealous because your cat is going back and forth behind you. It's awesome. I love it.
I'm on the phone, so I left the door open to my office, and I have one cat sleeping right next to me, and the other cat is kind of pacing the room. So yes, I apologize for this. My students, by the way, at Fairleigh Dickinson University, loved it last semester when we were teaching fully online, when the cats would make an appearance. So
oh yeah. Yeah.
Thankfully, we're back in the classroom now. So
there's that classic video of somebody who was in the UK, the minister with the tail that went through. And I've had that on my podcast in years past. Now I close the door, but I had that tail, and it was hilarious. But again, coming back to the whole person, it is more personal. It is more, we're connecting more on this level. And I think that's just a testament to this whole time, where people are realizing that you can't just have this this work persona, like I have everything together and I'm like you said about a machine or being a robot, and then flipping and being this whole person and wondering why people were so unhappy. And to me, it's funny because when we talk about these types of topics, like bringing humanity into the workplace, there's a part of me that's like, I mean, how obvious is that, right? And yet that hasn't been happening. And so, and you can speak to that much more than I can. I remember I did work at a large law firm for a little while, and I got a bit of a taste of that. And I thought, man, this is like literally cookie cutter, it felt like prison is what it felt like.
yeah, that emotional work is hard, right? To regulate and keep everything, separate and to get, one of the things I would say about, being a university professor for the last 20 odd years, young people, they increasingly want to work at a place where it suits their personality and it suits their values and there's a values match and they can be more of themselves at work. And I think over time that has transformed a lot of workplaces, which is for the good. But also it's a signal to employers, I think, that you need to create conditions where employees feel like they're valued as people. And can I just give one example? And it's a small
Please.
anecdote.
Yeah.
But this is a small way to do this. So a lot of employers, when you have employee onboarding or orientation, it's very much like, here's your job description, here's your desk, go. Or here's the, don't sexually harass anybody or, whatever you do during orientation, right? But so this is a while ago. But when I was in grad school, I was on a co-ed softball team, a kind of a competitive one. And one of my teammates had just gotten a new job. And this team was very important to her. She had just graduated college. She was a Division I athlete. This was like her connection to that part of her life. And during like the interview and onboarding process, they learned about our team and how important it was to her. So the week she started at the job, our next game, we go out to the bar afterwards. And then when we're settling up the bill, the waitress says, nope, the bill has been taken care of. The new employer found out where people go after the games and paid the bill for the team, just out of recognition for her. And her softball team has nothing to do with work, right? This is not just valuing her as because of what she could return at work, right? This is valuing her as a whole person and putting respect on something that's really important in her life outside of work. And that simple gesture, $100 a beer, has a huge impact, right? It's showing that we can value employees as more than just a partial person, right? That's kind of what you were describing. You only bring part of yourself to work. They're telling her, no, like we value all of you, not just 9 to 5 or whatever. We respect all that. And there's one quote that actually like the one quote I got in the book that gave me the title, The Whole Person Workplace, where the former chief human resources officer of this amazing company said, you have to remember, you get the whole person through the door. You get their backs and their hands and their minds and their hearts. And they're all at different stages in their lives. And I found that so inspirational. And I think it's really instructive that, people aren't just whatever, their brain and hands that they're typing with. They have backs and hands. And a lot of people physically work. And we need to take care of the physical body. Their minds, making sure people are developing and they feel good about the rest of their lives, and their hearts, what they care about. And also there are all different places in their lives. So there are, 22-year-olds drowning in student loan debt. And now there's companies that are doing something about it, right? That help people refinance their student loans and things like that. And then there's the kind of working parents with young kids who really need a different set of supports. And then people at different stages in their lives who need different types of supports. And so it really means employers need to listen and provide a variety of supports for everyone. So everyone is included and everyone is valued as a whole person. Because if it's just, and this was the mistake I was making in the early version of the book, if we just value like, hey, we need to support working parents, that implies that some people get supported and some people don't, right? What we need to do is create conditions where everyone feels valued, even if it's different in different places. And if I could just circle back to kind of one of your first, when you first introduced the book, thank you for saying what you said about the book, that you liked it and everything. I wrote it to be very practical, give a lot of examples from large and small organizations, so large multinational companies to literally a general store with 12 mostly part-time employees, and everything in between, to show that any organization can start implementing at least some of this on almost any budget. And I'm a college professor, but this is not a theoretical book. This is, built to be very, very practical. And the other thing I don't like about business books is a lot of authors say, like, this is the one secret to success or the 3-step process, and life's too complicated for that. So what I really tried to do was talk about a philosophy or a value system. We value employees as whole people. And if you believe in that and you make that part of your culture, then that leads you to the decisions that make sense for you and your workplace and your people. So it's going to look very different in different companies. And maybe certain programs or policies or decisions are right for you, and some others might not be. But it's starting with the value system and then using that as the basis for deciding on how you're going to interact and support your employees.
Yeah, well, and I think as an employer, we think of the organization as an entity, but really it's made up of people. It's made up of leaders. And so if you give it's like permission, you're giving permission to say, hey, we want all of you. We want, we recognize that we can't even actually differentiate and say, okay, only part of me is going to go to work today. So we're getting all of you. And what that also does is it gives the freedom back to also the leaders to say that they have the permission to be human as well. And
Absolutely.
they don't have to have all of the answers. And that's where I think there's this imposter syndrome, which is so common, is because they think I've got to have it all together and I can't show any flaws and I've got all the answers. And that's very stressful to be in that position. And then they wonder why they're burned out, or why they go off and do something and sabotage themselves, because they've been holding themselves into a level of perfection, not just excellence, but perfection. And it's stressful for everyone. And so when we,
heavy, right?
It is heavy.
Professional armor, it's heavy. Weights is down. You said it beautifully.
Yeah. So talk about you used a couple of the examples there, and I love the way you broke down the book in terms of the different areas. You mentioned working parents. You mentioned, I know there's also, elder care, vacation. You talk also about the financial assistance, the student loans, that type of thing. I love one of the examples was children's education, even helping, I think that as a leader, I believe that great leaders build other leaders, and leadership doesn't mean you have to run a big company. It's leading your own life. And part of that, a big part of that life, even though we like, it's all of the intangible things, but it also is monetary too. We need to have a certain amount of financial well-being to make things work and to provide for our children and our children's children and that. So I loved that example of the companies that are actually supporting their employees in setting up a children's education for that. And I believe like helping them to build some wealth. So by the time they retire, they actually are taken care of. So we're not sending more people out into, the world and saying, well, good luck, here's your gold watch. And good luck with that. And now they're trying to survive on a small, pension or security. So talk a little bit about some of these examples.
Yeah, sure. So at heart, right, how do we value, quote unquote, employees, right? Base compensation and core benefits and things like that. So those need to be good, and they need to provide
kind of like baseline
livable wage, right? Because none of the other stuff matters. Like if you're not getting paid enough to have a financially secure life, it doesn't matter if your company has the greatest wellness program in the world, right? You're under stress all the time. And there's the gravity payments, which implemented 5-6 years ago. They implemented a $70,000 minimum salary in their company, which meant that everyone in their company at least now had. And what happens in the first 2 years? People bought houses, people got married, all people had babies. All these things that were putting off because they weren't financially secure enough, they were able to do now. We talked about, I think it was Boxed is the company you were referring to, which provides, they pay for college tuition for the children of their employees. And think about that for a second. What a stress that is for those of us who have children, and especially as they grow up. I have a high school junior at the moment, so I'm dealing with this stress myself. But also, think about who's ever going to leave that company. First off, because it's such a great benefit, right? You'd be financially foolish to leave that company, but also like that, if that indicates the values of leadership in their company and what they're putting their money where their mouth is in terms of values. Why would you leave a company like that? right? And that can be pretty expensive. So let me give a smaller version of this. There's uh, someone I know. He owns two organic food stores out in Northern California, and he and his wife were going to buy a new car, and they were going to trade in their old clunker, and they were going to get $1,200 for their car. But one of their employees was having trouble getting to work. Their car was unreliable, was like asking people for rides all the time. They gave this person a car, $1,200. And they said, well, 75 cents an hour for this person for the year, right? This person, that was 5 years ago. This person is now an assistant manager at the store. So 5 years ago is the key number here, right? Okay, so we kept this good employee for 5 years. Now they're a manager. Now they pay it forward. They're like the big zealot for this company, and they're a great manager, and they reciprocate the support that they receive to everybody else. And that gets to the last part of it. If you do this well, it starts sustaining itself by employees living these values too. So culture starts with leadership, through managers, with HR as kind of the experts, kind of helping policies and programs and decisions along. But ultimately, it has to be something everybody does. And I love the quote that this business owner said at the end. It's like, who wouldn't buy 5 years of great performance, loyalty, and paying it forward for $1,200?
Exactly.
And that's not paying the college tuition for every one of your employees. There's children, right? So there's different price points where we can express this. And there's even things that don't cost any money. There's one company that they had an all hands meeting traditionally at 9 a.m. And a lot of their, think about when you're dropping kids off at school or daycare or whatever, that getting there at 9 could be stressful. Someone said something, said, hey, it's kind of stressful for me to get here exactly at 9 to do something. And I said, yeah, sure. Let's move the meetings to 10. Like, no problem. We just never thought of it before. They moved the meeting up to 10 o'clock. And think about the collective stress that was like dissipated, right? Yeah. From dozens of employees, from making that one little change, listening to an employee concern. So it could be big benefits programs. It could be how we do performance management, how we onboard. It could be giant wellness programs that we invest millions of dollars in. And those are all great. But it could also just be listening and doing things in the moment that make sense for you and your employees.
Well, and I think about this idea of generosity. And last year I did a year-long mastermind, which I facilitated on generosity. And really what prompted that is I believe there's a generosity multiplier, and you're talking about it without calling it that. It is this multiplication effect, the sustainability of it, that when you are generous, when you invest, what you sow, you reap. So when you invest, it's going to come back to you. Now, sometimes it doesn't come back from the same place that you invested, but it comes back to you many times over. It's like good seed, in good soil, and, it will multiply. You grow an apple tree or whatever, and it's going to multiply over and over and over again, that concept. And so it's just good business to care about your people. And that's why in the beginning, I said, this is actually good for everyone. It's not just good for some, or that we have to do this. We have to have this cost because it's the cost of doing business. It's not a cost of doing business. It's an opportunity. I believe that business is really about creating value in the marketplace. And when you create value in the marketplace, it's not just through your products and services. It's about the way that you do business. And so that's why I love this concept, even as obvious as it sounds, but somehow along the way with the industrial age that came in, it got lost because everybody went to the factory and it was just about how many you could, push off the line type of thing. So this is really cool.
Yeah. And you're exactly right about, I think about how things come back to you, right? It's an investment. And, really my mission to some degree is I want to make, workplaces work for everybody. And, if we think about it more expansively and more generously, we can do that. Because it works for everyone when that happens. When we have someone, we have an employee who we value as a whole person and we demonstrate that value, they return that to us by, being more engaged, by working harder, by being, someone who will refer another person to come join the company, right? And you don't know exactly how it plays out, right? In terms of the benefits back to you. And that's not the only reason you should do it. You should do it because it's the right thing. But the fact is, it it rebounds on itself. And at the very end of the book, I have a chapter where it's like implications or like action items for like different readers. So for if you're a leader or a manager or an HR professional, but I have a section for individual contributors, for just rank file employees. And I think it gets to exactly what you're saying, which is if you instead of grumbling that somebody's going to be out on parental leave for 6 weeks, maybe support them cheerfully, and maybe you pick up a little bit of the load in the short run, but maybe that comes back. And nobody, the boss doesn't buy the birthday card or the birthday cake often, right? That's something that a coworker does, right? And it starts, right? And that those are just little things, right? But they're not really little when they get multiplied and become kind of part of the culture.
Well, it's the culture that you were talking about, because I've had people on the show here, which I get the concept, right? They say like culture doesn't start at the top. It's with everyone, and it is. And leadership does set the tone for it. And oftentimes that's where people follow the lead of the leader. In that being said, it is about, it has to go beyond a leader, who is, it's like, well, it's their job to do that. I love what you said there in that last chapter, or one of the final chapters of your book, when you start talking about the responsibility of the employee to actually not to return the favor, but take ownership of that as well and start to pass it on, pay it forward as well. I think that's really, really powerful. I do want to talk about, before we wrap up, because I know remote working is such a hot topic right now. And yes, I did say post-COVID environment in the beginning. It's funny, your PR people had said, post-COVID. And I'm like, I don't know, are we? But let's just believe that we will be.
Book launched in August when it looked like it was we were just about,
and here we are again, and we're back into it. So, but no, but we will be on the other side of this at some point. And so, the one thing that may carry over is most likely is this idea of remote working, because it works for certain people, for certain industries and roles and so forth. So how do you anticipate it settling in, and or it maybe even changing and morphing in the near future?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. So I don't think some workplaces are going to get everybody back all the time, and some places are going to stay remote fully. And in fact, pre-pandemic, and a few of the companies I really profiled were pre-pandemic kind of remote work or results-only work environment where you can, you always could pick and choose, kind of a hybrid approach. So that was already being done in pockets before. But I think most organizations are going to be somewhere in the middle with some sort of hybrid plan. Also, I think even if it's everybody in the office, I think people are going to retain this level of flexibility that remote work gives you for the, hey, I need to leave early for my child's school event, or or there's something going on in my life, so let me work from home for 2 weeks, kind of thing. So the ad hoc and the informal ways of remote working, I think, are going to be retained even in companies that really want to get most people back in person. And that's really great, because that was going to be like the big, like, what in version 1 of this book was going to be what I advocate for, which is to let people work from home sometimes. But I think most people, listen, I live in greater New York City. Commutes are horrible. If people could get out of commutes 2 days a week, it gives them so much time in life and less stress, and, if people go in 3 days a week, or if teams get together and figure out these are the days we need to be available to each other in person and not, it gets more complicated. It's more complicated for HR professionals, for managers and leaders, and for individual employees. But I think it forces some of that communication, that we're mindful about things. And, there's a couple of companies that have experimented with 4-day work weeks through this, just not 5th day work from home, but just 4 days of work. And they found that they have fewer and shorter meetings, that they are more focused on they're getting the same amount of work done, just because they're being more mindful about their time and their communication. So I think that gets back to the heart of remote work, is if it's going to be a hybrid approach, we need to be mindful about when we use our remote time and what we use it for and what we use our in-person time for. Because some things are better done in person, and some things are perfectly fine being done remotely. At my university this semester, we are teaching in person, which is great. I'm so happy to see my students after a year. And that's going well. We're all masked, and we had vaccine mandates and the whole works. And actually we've been really, really good. Very few cases and things like that, which has been fantastic. But we've been encouraged, and most full-time staff are encouraged to go to work most of the time. But we're encouraged for most meetings to be done, if it's fewer than 10 people, for our meetings to be done on Zoom. And honestly, I love it, because the days I do not teach on campus, I'd often drive like 40 minutes into campus for an hour-long meeting that really didn't need to be a meeting probably, and then hang out in my office for an hour or two and then go home. And I'm like, well, that I spend as much time in the car as I did in productive work. So that's just an example for me. I really like this hybrid approach. I hope we have most of our meetings on Zoom for the foreseeable future. It'll save a couple commutes. It'll save, a lot of that other time that could be used, for other purposes.
Yeah. Well, and I think about, like, really when you're talking about hiring people, let's just fundamentally, I always look, go at principles and take it down to the core. Fundamentally, you hire people to get work done, ultimately to get results. Yeah. And it's so crazy that somehow this idea of time, became the priority. It's like, how many hours do you spend? That's more important. So we pay you for time. And yes, we pay you for results, but it has to be this amount of time. And a lot of the time is that people actually, there's wasted time in there. Like you said, there's meetings that are longer than they should be, because people know you've got this much time that you need to fill.
Yep.
And I think about when I was talking about that law firm that I worked at, and it jangled their brain to think that I was getting done, because I was working there, like I was 3 days a week on this project. So we came from a small firm. The tax department moved to a bigger firm. I was a tax litigation coordinator. So I was working on this project, and I had said to them when they asked me to work there, I said, nah, I don't want to have a job. Thank you. I have a business and so forth. And they said, well, we really need you because you have a unique set of skills. And I said, I wouldn't do it for more than 3 days a week. And they said, well, we think you can do it in 3 days. And it was a crapshoot, whether or not I could do it, right. But I could. And I was doing it in 3 days. When I left, they had to have 2 people to cover me, right? Full-time people to cover me, what I was doing in 3 days. Now, the funny thing is that this firm, great firm, in many ways, one of the top firms in Canada. They had a real hard time conceptualizing that they were paying me as much as they were paying me because I was at the top end, but I was only there for 3 days. And they're like, we want you to be here for 5. And I remember saying to them, okay, wait a second. So let me get this straight. You want me to spread out what I do and I'm able to do in 3 days, spread out that into 5 days so that you feel better about how much you're paying me. That makes no sense. Yep. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, that makes absolutely no sense. And so it's very refreshing to see how companies are going, hey, wow, it's not about whether this person stays to 5. It's about, did they get their work done? And that's how the entrepreneurial world works and have for many, many years. That's what we get paid for performance. You don't work, you don't get paid, but it's not about the time. It's about getting the result. If it takes you 4 hours to get the result, or it takes you 40 hours, who cares? Get the result. And that's what you're looking for. Now you can get more results in theory, right? But there is a point where you get law of diminishing returns, and you need that downtime, that creative time, so that you can actually be effective, or family time. So you can be more effective in when you are on that concentrated time. Dan Sullivan actually talks about that. He talks about the, free days, focus days, buffer days. And, it's this idea of helping his entrepreneurs and business owners he worked with to have more free days in the year. Because those free days are actually the recharge days, so that when they're on the focus days, boy, they are like super,
Yep.
super focused and on point, and they can get a lot more done than they could if they're spreading out that time.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Just that's an amazing story, and completely consistent with my experience talking to some of these great employers. The kind of the first employer I profile, and it's profiled quite a bit in the book, is Ryan, which is a tax services firm out of Dallas. And they had one of those cultures like law firms where billable hours is the thing. And the first thing they did when they did performance reviews every year, they had an Excel spreadsheet with the number of hours somebody worked. And that was the first thing they looked at. But they broke that culture over a couple of years of decision making when leadership got behind it. And now they were a result only work environment where performance on key metrics are tracked continuously, so everyone can always see them. And as long as your metrics are good, like they don't care where, when, how you work, as long as your metrics are good. And there's a little bit of 360 feedback to make sure you're being a good team player. But teams and managers, they just decide, how are we going to work together? When are we going to collaborate? And they were doing this since 2008. When they made this change, they started with a 32 or 34% turnover rate. It's now at like 3 or 4%.
Wow.
Their financials are much better. Their employee engagement's much better. Their level of community service they do as an organization is so much higher because I think it's created this culture of care. And that's a big transformation. Not everybody can do that, right? But you could learn lessons along the way and change how you do performance evaluation and performance management, which gives people more ways to customize how they work best, which then gives them the gift of time, right? To work around some of their other priorities or responsibilities, or if they meet all their goals at a certain time, they can plug out. And the other thing, we do not respect paid time off or vacation time very much in this country, and I think it's something that's not to our benefit for doing so. And big companies, EY, I like one of the things they do is whenever there's a 3-day weekend with a holiday, everybody gets a 4-day weekend. They give the day kind of before. So if it's Labor Day on Monday, people get off on Friday, and it's a whole company day off. So people don't have to check their emails and worry about falling behind other people and things like that. And for where I live, again, just outside New York City, but a lot of people go to the Jersey Shore. Driving to the Jersey Shore on Friday night on a holiday weekend is a nightmare, but driving on Thursday night's not so bad, right? And then you get this full weekend, and you could really unplug. And then EY works you hard, right? Companies like that, they expect a certain level of performance and effort. So they're smart, I think, to build in a couple, just throughout the year, that adds up to 5 or 6, 7 extra days off that aren't really part of your PTO or your vacation time and sick time and things like that, just as a way to relieve some of that burden. So that's just another example, I think, of being creative about respecting time for life and how that rebounds to better performance. Because if you're stressed out, if you're not well, right, and work is dragging your life down, life can drag your work down too. So it's important to respect time for life.
That is a great place to end. And I love what you just said there. If this balance between the two. And I was just thinking that, those 5 days, let's say per year, if you don't give them those 5 days, they'll end up taking them somewhere else.
Maybe,
Or they'll
yeah.
be low energy on the days when they're there, or they'll have extra sick days or whatever. So take care of your people, bottom line, and they will take care of you. So Scott, thank you so much for being here today. This has been great. I'm going to encourage our listeners to go and get a copy of Scott's book, The Whole Person Workplace: Building Better Workplaces Through Work-Life Wellness and Employee Support. You can go to scottbehson.com. We'll make sure that's all in the show notes, of course, the link and everything. Scott's also got a couple of other books that you can check out there as well. The Working Dad's Survival Guide and We Hate Team Projects, a friendly, useful guide for college project teams. So some really, really great resources from Scott, and well-researched. And again, Scott, we're just so grateful to have you here and to share a little bit of a taste of what you've discovered with us so that we can learn and be better leaders and build better workplaces for everyone.
Right. Well, thank you for a great conversation and for spreading the word about, leadership, transformation, and, again, building better workplaces. That's what it's about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm all about building a better world for everyone. And it includes a big, big part is the workplace. In fact, I've had people ask me and saying, why do you focus on the marketplace? Because there's other areas that I could work on. But I say, everybody is in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Everybody is impacted by the marketplace. Families are impacted by the marketplace. Even people that are unemployed are impacted by what's happening in the marketplace, because if people are stressed out in the workplace and they're not paid enough, then they're not going to be as generous to the people that are not working or that need help or whatever. So it's just, I talk about that generosity multiplier. It's good business. It's good for all of us all around. And so leaders of transformation take action. I encourage you, if you're listening or you've been watching here on video, is to get a copy of Scott's book. But take what you've learned here, at the very least, is just start taking what you've learned here and start being creative. Scott, you mentioned this word creativity. When we are creative in one area, it actually spills over to other areas. How you do anything is how you do everything. And so start being creative about the way that you approach work. Consider the fact that you're actually paying people for results, not time. And you're going to get the whole person there. And the more you take care of them, the more they'll take care of you. And they'll be an ambassador for your organization. Whether you have 2 people, whether you have 2,000 people, it really is, it actually starts with you. And even those of you that are listening that are the one person you're like, it's me, myself, and I. Well, when's the last time that you actually were kind to yourself and created a good workplace for yourself? How about that? Why don't you start there and be kind to yourself? Take time off, allow yourself that little rest time so that you can actually be effective when you're in the workplace. Maybe take some time with your family. And I encourage my clients to do that all the time, because if you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of others as well. So it really is pervasive all across the board. So again, I encourage you to take action on some of the things that you learned here, apply it in your life. It's going to make a difference. I know we're at the end of 2021, we're going into 2022, and let's hope for a better year, for an amazing year and a breakthrough year in terms of turning the tides. And it starts with you and I and what we do right now. So take this time. And if you have questions, you can always reach us, of course, through leaderstransformation.com. I'd love to hear your stories, hear how this has impacted you. If you've got questions, of course, you can reach out to Scott directly. We'll make sure all the links are in the show notes. So again, thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.